Hello, I'm Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and all small smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me is David Morassutti.
Hello, hello.
Hello, David. I have a green screen behind me. Guess what color it is?
Well, it's green, but it's not really. It's.
It's a
Uh,
faded green.
yeah, it's kind of. Yeah,
It's
I
a
was gonna
dollar
say.
store tablecloth.
I couldn't believe it when you told me that. I was just
Dollar
like,
store tablecloth. It worked fine until my camera software said, "Bye, see you later, maybe." It was gone. It is what it is. So much fun. Hey, so let's start with the fact that we have to start with the game between. Every year it's the same thing. Coaches get fired, and all of a sudden, I don't know what it is. Teams all of a sudden play better. They play over their head, and Ottawa. And I kind of predicted this because it seems to always happen. There's that first game. It's that extra adrenaline. It's that
Mhm.
you got nothing to lose situation where you're starting from scratch. The coach um, is he's what he's got a week into coaching, so it's not about coaching, it's just a mindset. I really think it's just simply a mindset. They beat Montreal. The Ottawa Red Blacks beat the team that you and I both think they before this weekend they could have possibly ended up in first in the Eastern Division. um Ottawa just rained all over that parade.
I wasn't surprised that they were gonna try to because I was on the show and I said it was not looking good for Toronto to be losing games and then having Montreal behind them, and they had the easier schedule. And then Ottawa literally said, "Here, hold my beer. I'll take care of. I'll make sure that that doesn't actually come to fruition."
They said, "Hold my six pack." What are you talking? Hold my beer. They said the six pack, the 2-4, name it all.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
no, they Ottawa's a much better team than their record indicates. The biggest problem with Ottawa has been and will be at quarterback.
yeah. Quarterback. It's their offense has continuously held them back all year, right? They just don't have the offense that you go and you say, you know what? Like this is a team that's gonna put up 30 points. They're not gonna win if they put up 30 points. The thing is their defense has to give up less than 30 points. But then against the Argos, especially, it was the Ottawa offense that was giving up more points than their defense was. So yeah, I think it was just the the message needed to change because once the coaching noise gets out there, it becomes a distraction. I don't care what anybody says, but once it's out there that a coach is on the hot seat, you can't tell me the players don't feel that pressure at all. And that was, I think, what was going on with Ottawa, especially on the offense. Like these are proud players. They want to play for each other and all those things. But that wasn't a team that was playing for each other. But in the Thanksgiving game against Montreal, that was a team that was playing for each other.
They definitely were. And Bob Dice ends up looking like a hero. This is a guy who's a well traveled coach, a very experienced Canadian Football League coach, leads his team to a victory. Um, I don't know. I don't know what the odds are on them winning a few more in a row. If they do, it's going to be kind of hard to take away the reins from Bob Dice.
Well, here's the thing: if you're Bob Dice, he had a chance when he took over for Corey Chamberlain in Saskatchewan. That was the first. So he's been in this situation before. he just never got the gig. But
Yeah.
now, if you're Ottawa, you kind of want Bob Dice to do well and succeed because I bring up the coaches cap. I don't know what Bob Dice's coaching contract is like. I don't know if they have to renew it for next year. But if they don't have to renew it, he does well. You found yourself a head coach, or at least someone with the experience, and then he finds a coordinator that he can work with on offense. It's easier to find coordinators than to find head coaches.
Well, especially head coaches who understand the Canadian Football League, there are idiosyncrasies that need to be learned. There is a style that is CFL centric. The CFL is the CFL, and it runs the way it runs. It's a league that plays differently than almost any other league, that plays football. I mean, it's a unique game requiring unique coaches with a unique ability to be successful based on experience, and you need to have a lot of Canadian Football League experience, which Bob Dice does have, and there are a few other coaches out there that have it as well. Right now, though, because of Nick Arbuckle's success, he threw it an 87.5% accuracy, 229 yards, but the key is the points made it onto the board. Every week we talk about quarterbacks that throw for 300 yards, 350 yards, and lose. It really, I've become less and less convinced that statistics are relevant in the Canadian Football League.
No, here's the thing: statistics can be relevant when they show. You can use statistics to make any argument you want, right? Really can. Like right now, Argos fans are relevant in the fact that McLeod Bethel Thompson leads the league in passing yards. So that's one stat. It doesn't tell the whole picture, right? Um, but what I look for, and we were talking about Nathan Rourke before he got injured. By the way, we do have to talk about Nathan Rourke today. I do want to talk about it.
We'll talk to him after this little segment.
Yeah, but it's when the numbers overwhelmingly show when things are going good and when things are going bad. And I think that's where people get it wrong with the stats. You have to use the stats properly. You can't just say he leads the league in passing yards. Okay, but what's that supposed to mean? It has to be meaning when you bring a stat up. Or, oh, this team leads the league in interceptions or turnovers. Okay, I can deduce from that that this team is likely not a good team if they're leading in turnovers. Like things like that, you have to, when you're bringing up an argument like that, you got to deduce it as this is the reason why it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, well, I'll explain it in another way, which is clear, and that is that it doesn't matter how many yards you put out there. It doesn't matter the percentage. It doesn't matter how many two and outs you have. It all matters. But one thing's for sure. One thing's for sure. What matters in the Canadian Football League is the red zone. That's something that's becoming abundantly clear in this league, where the quarterbacks that win football games take the team to the red zone and convert. Um, you can go up and down the field twice as often as you do in game A, and in game B you don't go up and down the field as much. But if you, instead of throwing up a field goal, you throw up touchdowns, and that's the whole point. If every time you get a possession and you make it from your end of the field to the other end to the 5 yard line, and then you have to kick a field goal, that's a lot of statistical woohoo. But unfortunately, it doesn't lead to anything but a field goal, which is only, it halves the score that you could have. So you
Yeah.
need to you need to to put together yardage of, instead of 229, you have to put yardage of 450 to get the same amount of points. So that's all it is to me. As far as, it's about efficiency. In other words, Time of possession's great. All these statistics, they all, time of possession, turnovers, all this stuff. It all comes down to, can you score? In the Canadian Football League, that's what it comes down to. Can you score? And if you can't score touchdowns, you got to score a whole gaggle of field goals. We've seen games won because the teams, throws up 7 field goals, 6 field goals. Imagine if they were throwing touchdowns up there.
Yes. Well, that's the big one there, right? I always when field goals constant. This has been my issue with the CFL really for the last few years. Kickers, you need a good kicker in the CFL because you need to be able to get points when the opportunity is there. But
And
that's
field
not.
position. And
But
field position.
that's not when you're within. We're seeing teams go for it when they're on the 3 yard line and kicking field goals. That is not the CFL. To me, that's not the CFL I grew up on. But the
Not
reason
mine
is,
either.
and you know the reason why this is, Frank, is because you take the points when you get them, because you have belief in your defense to keep the score low enough that you can just chip away at a deficit or continue to slowly build up a lead, and your defense can hold the other team from getting touchdowns. And
They got,
that's the issue I have with it.
yeah. You know, we don't want to talk about four downs, but good Lord. I mean, it's coming down to the point where if this is the kind of offense that we're going to have in the Canadian Football League, just let's have the four downs and stop pussyfooting around. Because if we're not going to have quarterbacks get the ball into the end zone, the game if the game relies on field goals for entertainment,
Well, you awake?
yeah, I'm awake. And that's a sad thing too. Just
I know, but I know. I'm just saying, like,
uh,
it's like you're
you know,
watching a game and you're just like you're trying to watch and keep yourself up, but it's like there's times where it's just like let's get a little excitement here. Let's build. Now, the one saving grace for the CFL is that a lot of these games have been close at the end, so there's drama at the end. It gets
absolutely. Well, that's
exciting at the end. But that's also because one team has been kicking field goals and hasn't been able to put a game away. Like Ottawa's game, if they didn't kick that field goal late, they could have put Montreal away if they scored a touchdown late. But because they can only get the field goal, Montreal had a chance to win it. And that's
absolutely, absolutely. Ottawa was 3 for 3. Montreal was 4 for 4. So their field goal kickers were efficient, did what they needed to do. Trevor Harris, by example, this is exactly what we're talking about here, was 30 of 38, which works out into 78.9%, 338 yards, 1 TD. How long is the Canadian Football League field?
was it
110.
110 yards. Sorry.
110 yards, right? That's up and down the whole field 3 times. 1 touchdown.
That's the problem. How is a quarterback putting up over 300 yards only getting one touchdown? I'm not asking to get them 4 touchdowns.
And
One,
it's
can we get more than one touchdown, please?
that's the issue. And then you have Nick Arbuckle, who played a great game by people's definition, didn't score a touchdown, didn't throw a touchdown, didn't throw an interception. Neither of the quarterbacks threw an interception. So the defenses weren't the boss in this game as far as the DBs and the
Yeah, which
they
I'm
weren't the
surprised about.
stars of the game, but
I was surprised about that.
yeah, and so you want to go further into what I'll call the CFL tailspin right now when it comes to scoring. It comes down to the running game in the Canadian Football League. In the past 5-6 years, look, we're looking at Jackson Bennett, who is turning into a pretty good running back, right?
Hmm.
41 yards. Walter Fletcher, that we've been praising anybody who's watched Montreal the past few weeks, he's been doing a great
He
job.
got a big ringing endorsement from his quarterback when they
Yeah,
were talking about William Stanback returning.
23 yards on 7 carries. Stanbeck was back, 8 carries for 20 yards. That's 2.5 yards a run. That's not; those are not Stanback numbers,
No,
right? So the running game is an issue in the Canadian Football League. The red zone is an issue. And if you want to win a championship, it's easy to do because Winnipeg does that. Caleros gets them in the end zone. Their running game, even though Andrew Harris is not in Winnipeg anymore, they have worked out a way to make the running game work, and it does work. And if your running game works and your quarterback in the red zone can make it happen, you're the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
well, I
Couch
was,
and Peters.
as you remember, I was very critical about the Winnipeg running game. I wasn't a believer in it, and boy, have I never looked so dumb.
Well,
You know
you
what's
know,
you know what's the funny thing, Frank? Also about Winnipeg. Or we'll talk. Are we going to talk about that game actually? Because maybe I'll.
sure. Okay. Well, listen. So let's leave this one behind. The Red Blacks
Okay,
24,
before we get to
Montreal
that game
18.
though, I have something funny I want to say.
Well,
You know that you and I both watch Game of Thrones.
right. Of course we do. Yes.
You know the saying winter is coming.
Yes.
Well, in the West, guess what?
Winter's here.
Rourke is coming.
Rourke is coming. Okay. You want to tell the story. Tell the story. Apparently, the best quarterback in the Canadian Football League in the first few games of the season is coming back to the British Columbia Lions, a
He
team
was.
that is nicely, they're in second place, but they really need to have a big finish. They've got a real good team in Calgary crawling up their you know whats,
Yep.
and now we hear that Nathan Rourke is coming back.
He was practicing throwing footballs at practice today. They have 3 games left in the season, so 3 weeks. If he's already practicing on a limited basis, I'm going to put it out there and say I think you're going to see Nathan Rourke start one of these last few games potentially.
I figured the second last game. From the time he got injured, the numbers suggested that he could be back in the second last game. I don't think the last game is enough, David. I think they need him to come out for at least two.
Be nice
One,
if he could get 2.
one to take a hit and have the confidence to be able to get back up. Two, to run around the field a little bit. And of course, three, not 30 games, but in the 2 games, the third thing that he has to do is get his arm in game shape, which is something that he started off really well coming out of training camp, but that's after a week of training camp, right? So he doesn't have the benefit of a training camp. His training camp is going to be right now, what you're talking about.
Yeah, because he hasn't been throwing right. He's probably been doing tosses to kind of keep the arm somewhat loose, but it's one thing to just do tosses as a quarterback. We're talking about getting the hips into it, getting the footwork involved. He's coming off a foot injury. Foot injuries are very tough for quarterbacks to overcome because they require every part of their body. The mechanics are all involved. And we also know that what makes Nathan Rourke a great quarterback isn't just his throwing ability. It's that he can take off, and then you're screwed if you're chasing him.
David, quarterbacks' most important asset is their arm, but without footwork, the arm does not work that well,
This is very true.
right? So he needs the footwork. A quarterback's footwork is plant your foot. It's all you might say, oh, well, he can compensate for that. Yeah, the problem is his accuracy will suffer.
Well, not only that, his ability to evade the rush, create time for him to find the receiver down the field. Teams are like, let's see if he can evade us. Let's see if he can create more time for himself with his feet.
Oh,
Right?
and the suggestion on let's see if he can take a hit. That'll be, let's sack him. Let's see what happens there.
Yeah. No, for sure. Like I'm like Nathan Rourke. We've found that football players maybe don't always listen to their body is saying very well at times. But
Are
I
we
think they
suggesting that he might not be ready to come back and he might be pushing it? Because, there were conversations that we had
I
that he's
think
got a very young career and he shouldn't rush himself back because,
no, he definitely
right?
shouldn't rush himself back, but he also understands that he needs to show that he has some. I guess maybe he wants to show he's got some toughness to him too, right? He might not be 100% when he comes back. No player ever really plays at 100% during a season. There's always something,
Hmm.
but I think he wants to show like, okay, no, I'm capable of coming back from an injury like this. I can. I'm not just going to lay down and say that tough luck. I'm done. There's a possibility to come back. These guys are gonna do what they can. That's what makes
He's a
these
talented
athletes.
player. He's a talented player, and he's confident. And there's no reason for him to be less confident. There's going to be an adjustment period going from being injured to back into full steam ahead, right? So this guy is a talent. I can see him as if he gets 2 games, he's going to be a problem in the playoffs since he's not going to be getting a bye,
Yeah,
and the odds are very good, right? It'll be Calgary and BC.
yeah.
It's going to be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting end to the season because that second place is still a little up for grabs. There's a bit of a, you know, Calgary needs to get real lucky in these last few games. Gets a little help if they want to finish ahead. I think it's important who is the road team in this game. I can imagine. I can imagine how important it is for those BC fans to get that home game.
Oh, I mean, it would mean a lot to them, right? Like, I don't like. I didn't even bother to check what their road like which team is better at. I think yeah. See, like Calgary, like for BC, it makes no difference. They have almost identical records at home and away. Calgary is actually better on the road than they are at home. You don't tell me that BC, the one thing maybe that would work in their favor too, um, you know, it's going to be cold. Injuries tend to flare up more in cold weather. So maybe, yeah, maybe they're just like, let's get that first playoff game in a nice, cozy indoor stadium, the only one in the league, rather than having to go to Calgary in November, where it could be quite. It's early November, I get that, but it's still November in Calgary. It's not going to be pretty.
No, it's not. Absolutely not.
Unfortunately, it's Winnipeg that's next, so they're not going to completely avoid it.
No. Let's talk about real quick Edmonton and Winnipeg. Edmonton proved to be a team that is not ready for prime time. We
Nope.
just talked about Winnipeg and their quarterback. But we talked about Caleros and the importance that he has. Um, 3 touchdowns, an interception. But 3 touchdowns. The rushing game for them is between the two main guys that were running. They're 88, 80 plus yards, which is good for today when you consider what we're looking at is less than 50 everywhere.
Yep. No, that's very true. And I think the one thing I wanted to bring up about that game was it got to the point where they took out Zach Collaros and Drew Brown throw, like his only completion of the game was a 65-yard touchdown, and it was a beautiful throw. It's a beautiful catch, and it's just that's when you know a team is just solid all the way around because they can bring in their backup quarterback and nothing changes.
And their number 3 quarterback.
That too, yes. Technically, Prukop because he's used a lot in the rushing game. I wanted to bring this up too about the stats in that Ottawa Montreal game, and it's gonna be true in a lot of these games. But Caleb Evans had what 2 rushing touchdowns in that game, can we? I understand it's great to score a touchdown. It's not easy, but I think quarterbacks that get the 1 yard sneak maybe shouldn't be boasting as much when they score because that 1 yard of separation of the line of scrimmage really gives the quarterback a lot of favor. And I don't really think it like if they took that away, I think teams would have to look at different options to do those goal line. Like you're not going to see goal line sneaks as much when there's not that 1 yard of separation. That was something I forgot I wanted to bring up. But Dalton Schuen, he's he's got. I think he's pretty much locked down rookie of the year. Like
Well, they lost a couple of receivers. Lawler, they don't seem to be missing him.
Darvin Adams.
Tarvin Adams, they don't seem to be missing him either. I mean, this is a team that we've talked for years about Calgary and next man up. Winnipeg clearly has found that, and this year they've really done a good job when you consider they let Andrew Harris go, and not that they don't miss Andrew Harris. He's a great running back, but they found a way to produce without him, and that's what they are, next man up. And and it's amazing how the points that they're putting up. 48 they put up, David.
They put up 50. Was it 56 a few weeks ago against Saskatchewan?
Yeah.
Frank, when was the last time a rookie wide receiver led the CFL in yards and pass and receiving touchdowns? I'd have to ask somebody because I'm not even sure myself.
In their 16 games, they've scored 482 points. But here's the thing: BC's only played 15, just like Calgary, and they've scored 445. Calgary has scored 462. That snuck up on me. You know what? Calgary has been a very consistent scoring team.
Well, for Calgary, it's like they had the one blowout against Edmonton, but every week they're scoring. Yeah, they're consistent. Like Winnipeg, well, you might be surprised about how many points they've had, but they've had games where they've been under 20 points scoring. The game they lost to Montreal, that was one. The first game of the season against the Red Blacks, like there are games that Winnipeg just hasn't been able to get anything going offensively. And then
Absolutely.
it inflates the score when they're putting up 56, 48. Like they're a team that has when they win big, they win big. And then like there's teams like as you said Calgary, each and every week you're kind of expecting them to be in the 25 range to score. They're kind of consistently where they are. You're not going to like see Calgary score like 13 points in a game. It doesn't really happen for them because they've found the right formula to win. They
And the right
definitely
quarterback.
quarterback running game too. They have
Well,
two
they're the
excellent.
same thing for them. The running game is really important.
It is no. It allows and it allows teams to have to respect the running game. So then the passing game opens up a little bit more. And I mean, we talked a bit about Dalton Schuin, but Malik Henry, second year in the league, he's over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and he wasn't even the main guy to start the season, right? He's behind a Reggie Bagleton, Kamar Jordan, like those guys
Yep.
always were getting the targets from Bill Levi Mitchell, but now with Jake Mayer, he's the one that's being the recipient of his quarterback's love. Let's say.
Yep. And there's a lot of love there. Let me tell you, it's amazing. Um, you know when you look at Edmonton and you look at Taylor Cornelius, um, he's got great legs, right? He ran for 44 yards. He really didn't hit many targets. I understand the defense that he's up against,
Yeah.
and but I'm kind of not to talk about the end of the year for Edmonton, um, but I'm really disappointed in their season.
I'm disappointed that Taylor Cornelius earned himself a 2-year contract. And not only earned himself a 2-year contract frame, but if you listen to some of the players that kind of, it was him and Jake Mayer. It wasn't just that they earned 2-year contracts, but 2-year contracts that came with a little bit of guaranteed money on them. Kind of the pioneers of this new thing that CFL players are looking for. And I'm like, for Edmonton's sake, I'm like, why are you in such a rush to give this guy a 2-year deal?
I
Like,
guess they were afraid that they might lose him.
but it's not like he's lighting it up. Like, eventually he's going to have to be better than 45% against Winnipeg, especially when he's only throwing 24 times a game.
Yeah, and it this Edmonton the Elk team does not have. I don't know. I don't know. Their defense is nothing spectacular. Their special teams is nothing spectacular. Their offense, we just talked about, isn't that spectacular. And I'm curious and disappointed. I expected more from Chris Jones. Um, I don't know why it's been so difficult for him to improve his team. All I can figure is that maybe this team was really not that good, and maybe it was that bad that you know to get to the other side is a longer trip than I thought, and I know a lot of Edmonton fans thought and hoped.
For me, what I'm seeing here too is I'm seeing Chris Jones, the defensive coordinator, head coach, pretty pretty good. Chris Jones making football decisions. I'm sorry, I'm not there yet because he went out. He gave Kenny Lawler that great big deal. Kenny Lawler very deserving of it, but they weren't a Kenny Lawler away from being a good team. And this reminds me of when Jim Pop was with the Argos, and they went out and they signed Darrell Walker to this amazing deal. He did not have a quarterback really to throw the ball to him, and the offensive line in the Toronto was not very good. So Darrell Walker that season almost ruined. I wouldn't say ruined his CFL career, but it cast a very negative light on him because they're like,
He went
well,
bad on the vine. He went bad on the vine.
and they're like, if you're paying a receiver this much, he should be, going above and beyond to do it. But it's like when you're in a position that relies on somebody else to help you be successful. This is where I question like how much they pay receivers, how much they pay running backs, because without a good offensive line, without a good quarterback, it doesn't matter what you pay your running back and receiver. In my opinion, like I think Winnipeg is showing that this year. They let Andrew Harris go because they didn't want to. Andrew Harris wanted probably a lot of money. They said, well, you know what? We'd rather keep our core together than pay Andrew Harris. And here's Brady Oliveira filling in
That's
just
really
fine.
what happened. Is that they had somebody that they could plug and play. They
Yeah.
had somebody that could do almost as well as Harris for a lot less money. And then they were able to spend that money elsewhere. That's the cap at work. The cap, the cap more. There was always, he's back with the Argos again. The former head coach Jim is back with the Argos, and he used to say all the time, um, a player hits it big on the team, does really well. He's already looking for his replacement. And that's the way the CFL is.
Well, especially when the CFL cap hasn't increased, but then Kenny Lawler sets a new record for receiver pay, and it's just like, but the cap hasn't gone up. Where's the money coming from?
Obviously, coming up from places that's making the team not be as good. Um, you know,
Hence my reasoning behind the Taylor Cornelius deal, which is did Edmonton see a good deal for themselves and say, let's just get it done and we'll work with it? Or was this more so Edmonton thinking that there is something there, but man, they're gonna have a lot of work to do to get Taylor Cornelius to look like a respectable quarterback. Because, in my opinion, I don't see it. I just don't see a quarterback and say I'm worried about going up against Taylor Cornelius. On any given night, I'm not. If I'm a team, I'm not worried about going up against Taylor Cornelius.
The cap, by definition, requires that you find bargains.
Yep.
You've got to have the guys that you pay because you don't have any choice. You got to pay that guy because, or the couple of them, they're that good and hard to replace. You got to find other players you can replace. You got to find bargains. If you find the bargains, then you have a great opportunity to be successful, and you're able to keep the core players together, which ultimately is what the Andrew Harris thing's all about. They weren't able to keep Andrew Harris, but they were able to keep some other players. Maybe um, you know we'll see what happens in the playoffs. I mean, right now, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are the team to beat.
Yep.
Right
No,
now,
very much
they're
so.
the team. Calgary and BC have something to say, and they'll have some time now at the end of the season to make that statement. We'll see what that statement is. So for now, the Blue Bombers 48, the Elks 11. That's a given. That score is not a surprise in the truest sense. It's not a surprise. Week 18, yeah, the first 18 weeks of the season, and this one in particular, the first 17 and this 18th one, Winnipeg did what it does. Unfortunately, Edmonton did what they do,
Exactly.
and it is what it is. The next game is Hamilton defeats Saskatchewan. Now, this game isn't as big a surprise as the Ottawa Montreal game, but this game had as much impact on the standings, if not more, than the Ottawa Montreal game. This is the game that we talked about, and I talked about it before that you know if Hamilton wins out, they make the playoffs,
Yep.
right? So as long as they match mistakes with Saskatchewan, and by mistakes I mean losses, if here on in Hamilton loses, wins that extra game that I talked about that they have, that game in hand, then it becomes an issue of only matching Saskatchewan. If Saskatchewan loses, Hamilton can lose. If Saskatchewan wins, Hamilton has to win. Because of this victory, 18-14, Evans looked really good. Hamilton looked really good. Saskatchewan looked, this sounds like what I just said about Winnipeg and Edmonton. This is who Saskatchewan has been since very early in the season. Um,
I'm going
Mistake.
to disagree a little bit. I didn't think Dana Evans looked very good. What looked good for Hamilton was they finally did what I said they needed to do. They,
Hmm.
they, they ran the football. Frank, I said last week they need to run with the football. Guess how many times West Hill, how many carries he had? 25. I was like, oh my God, he can have over 10 carries in a game? That's actually possible. And that was the reason why they won, because they controlled the line of scrimmage. Dane Evans could have easily have lost in that game too, because he threw some very boneheaded interceptions
He
and
had no
mistakes,
touchdown passes, two interceptions. I was
right?
trying to be nice to the guy, David. For
No.
goodness sake, the poor guy's had a tough season.
Well, it's because
But
he's
you're
not
right.
playing it.
West Hill made the difference. How many times have we seen this year a running back run for 132 yards? How many times have we seen that in the past? I'm going to go as far as saying 4 years. How many times have we seen it in 4 years? 132 yards
I
rushing.
think the closest has been James Butler out in BC. I think Brady Oliveira he had a big game this. You don't see it often. You don't. How about this? When was the last time a Hamilton running back did that type of damage?
I agree.
That's been a problem for him. I've said it for the longest time. They need to get the running game going. You play in a stadium that does not favor the passing game. When that wind is chucking, the football ain't going anywhere very easily. So let's use the running game. Your offensive line can now, it's easier to run block than to drop back into pass protection, right? Keep your quarterback upright, keep him from having to throw costly interceptions. So I applaud Hamilton for sticking to their strength, but they're right now their ceiling is what Dane Evans can do on a game by game basis. And right now, the ceiling isn't very high for Dane Evans, and that's why Hamilton. Yes, they control their destiny, but Dane Evans is going to have unless Matthew Schultz comes back. I think the minute Matthew Schultz comes back, Dane Evans is not starting.
Ah,
I just
this
I
is
don't think they have confidence in him.
I,
I don't think he has confidence in himself right now.
I was trying to be a little nice. I mean, you don't throw two
Uh,
interceptions. I mean, the poor guy has had a tough season with
he has
injuries.
had tough
Hamilton's
times.
had a tough time, and you're so right. You're so right that you know he won't be the quarterback if all their quarterbacks are healthy.
No, he won't be the starting quarterback. He will continue to, and you know what? Depending on their roster, the way it works, he might not even be on. He might not even be dressed. Like if they need him as a backup, maybe. Unless Matthew Schultz because of the injuries, maybe they'll have him as a. But if they want some roster flexibility, like there's been times where he hasn't even been dressed. But I think now when you have the running game there, you might think otherwise. You might think that it'll be more important to have a different position flexibility out there.
Well, he has been the quarterback for two Grey Cup losses.
Yep.
For 2 years, he has battled with Mazzoli to be a starting quarterback. Proved at least to the coaching staff that he was the better quarterback. It's why they kept him, why they let Mazzoli walk. And he has had nothing but frustration, you know, going back to those two Grey Cups and this season. This poor guy, he has mentally, he has been through the meat grinder, David.
Yep.
He's going to need a major reset, and if this season doesn't if he doesn't or is unable to throw up a couple of good games before the end of the season, he may not even be a Hamilton Tiger Cat, because Hamilton right now, Mazzoli's gone because he couldn't get him there,
Yeah.
and they thought Dane Evans was the guy that would get them there. Dane Evans isn't doing it, and yet I don't think it's his fault. The Hamilton Tiger Cat organization, whether we want to admit it or not, or whether we believe it or not, is in a rebuilding year. Involuntary, but they're in a rebuilding year. And maybe they can get into the playoffs, make some noise. It'd be great if they could win and I'm talking from the perspective of a Hamilton Tiger Cat fan and a Hamilton Tiger Cat organization. If they could sneak in and beat Ottawa for one game and beat Montreal or beat Toronto like they did last year, their season will be salvaged, and that'll help with the confidence. But the whole thing here is that Dane Evans has not been able to stay healthy. Dane Evans has not been able to not throw interceptions. Dane Evans has not had, ball security has been his worst enemy forever. It's been a problem for him, and it's cost them in the Grey Cup. It's cost them in the past couple of seasons. And like I said, I tried to be nice, but it's kind of not being truthful. And I wish I hadn't have done it. I was just trying to see if I could
Well, it's a
sneak.
good thing I didn't agree with you because then we
Yeah,
both.
well, it's not a good thing you didn't agree with me. I was kind of hoping we could, because this has been a perpetual game after game after game after game with Dane Evans. He has not been a very good quarterback. We poo poo statistics, right? But
Yeah.
that statistic, the INT statistic, this year for him, you know, I'm trying to think. I can't remember the Argo quarterback's name. Um, if you remember a few years ago, I'm trying
James
to
Franklin.
remember who.
James Franklin.
Uh, Actually, I'm thinking even before him. Remember the quarterback that threw five interceptions in one game? That's the kind of poor quarterbacking that Dane Evans is challenging. There hasn't been a quarterback that's thrown so many interceptions that a team depended on as a number one. Quarterbacks coming in, learning the game, okay, fine, but This is a guy who's supposed to have a handle on it. This is a guy who got number one money. And this year's been a horror story for him. And I think he's better than that. And he needs a reset somehow, emotionally, mentally. That's, to me, what I think his biggest problem is. He's had a tough couple of years.
I mean, yeah, it hasn't been pretty. That's kind of putting it lightly, maybe. But I'm just trying to think of the quarterback. Are you thinking like Drew Willie? There's been
No,
Drew Willie, Logan Kilgore.
Logan Kilgore.
Oh,
Logan Kilgore. Remember he had that game? I think he threw 4 or 5 interceptions in one game.
probably it was probably honestly it might have been in that 2016 season where the Argos were just
Horrible.
god awful.
And that unfortunately, that's why Logan Kilgore isn't in the Canadian Football League anymore.
Oh, I
Right?
found it.
He
Yeah,
retired. Right.
5 interceptions against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers back
There it
on
is.
August 12th, 2016. He had 303 yards passing, a touchdown, with
Were
five
were they
interceptions.
throwing the run backs on the interception and and his positives? Can you imagine? Yeah, okay. Let's talk about better news for the Toronto Argonauts, and of
Yep.
course, they did win. They beat BC, a pretty good team, and a game that I got to be honest with you. I wasn't sure they'd be able to win the game. I wasn't sure, and then you listen to the phrase the best worst quarterback or the worst best quarterback in the Canadian Football League. Do you remember hearing that?
I don't remember hearing that.
No, that's what they were talking about on the panel, and some of the panelists got very offended by that. Um, but it's an interesting dichotomy that describes or is dichotomic word or wording,
Mhm.
that is used to say that, that they're it's like an oxymoron, right? To say that he is the best worst quarterback in the Canadian Football League is just a way of saying that he's inconsistent. But
Yes.
in this game, he had a couple of really nice passes, David.
The touchdown was a
Yeah,
perfectly executed play. Something that they have really struggled to put together. Like Ryan Dimony was not happy with the offensive performance in that game, but he at least acknowledged that they made the plays that they needed to. And the reason why they were able to is because their defense once again kept them in it. Like the Argos, like really the Argos offense at one point tried to give away the game with that fumble by McLeod Bethel Thompson where he was holding on to the ball and you see the guy coming and
with
you're
one
just
hand,
like, get rid of it. Get rid of it. What are
or
you doing
tuck it,
holding on to
or
it?
tuck it, or eat it.
Eat it. Exactly. And he didn't and that just that those are the things, right? But what happened? BC takes the lead. Argos come down, they score a touchdown, and they got a little help from the goalposts in the south end zone, which continues to be a. You want to talk about Halloween? Go for, if Argos fans want a Halloween costume idea, go as a field goal post. That'll scare a lot of kickers. I'll tell you that.
Over the past few years, the Argos have won a lot of games because field goal kickers have literally hit the upright.
Or have lost games in that regard too.
Yeah, they lost one like that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
It's been again, we're talking about field goals, right? We're not talking about interceptions. We're not talking about passes for touchdowns. We're talking about field goals, missed ones. When I was making the crack about 352 yards, 27 of 40 for Bethel Thompson. How many times can you go up and down the field? 352 yards? 110, that's 3 times. And one TD to go for it in the game.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't his worst game, but it wasn't his best game.
No, absolutely not.
It was a good bounce back game from the game against Calgary. I'll give him that.
Yeah, well, one thing the Argos have done under McLeod and under Dinwiddie is they have won games they shouldn't have won. That's
Yeah.
one thing. People, fans of the Argos, should keep that in mind. This is a team that wins games they shouldn't. That's a good thing.
It is. It's a good thing because it builds character. It shows that we can win even when we're not at our best. But that's not something that's sustainable.
Confidence. It breeds confidence as well. David, this was awesome. Thanks for doing it.
And thank you for pulling up with my cold. I'm still
Yes,
trying
I was
to
going to
get
say, take care of that cold. It's almost gotten worse from the beginning of the show.
you know what? Just it piles on. It piles on.
Mama, she going to make the chicken soup.
Yes, she will.
The zuppa chicken. Enjoy the polo soup,
I will.
or as they say in Mexico, pollo. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Frank.
He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. We did it today because it was a long weekend, and as we always do, we do it on Tuesday. That's today. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network for CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer. Please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.